name's Adam Becker. This is my story. I was born in Waconia, Minnesota in 1984 to two loving parents. My earliest memories were of wanting to be a hero, a policeman, a soldier in the army, or a ninja turtle. But by the time I'd gotten into high school, my life took a drastic change. My parents were getting a divorce, my family stopped going to church, and I started to experiment with drugs and alcohol. I chose friends that were angry. We listened to angry music and became keen to find everything wrong with the world around us. When I graduated high school, I felt like the victim of an oppressive society that just wanted to fit me into a box. And so, having found everything wrong with the box, I decided that I wanted no part of it. I dropped out of society. I thought that America was the problem. I thought it was the modern Babylon and that paying taxes was basically evil. And so I drove out west, gave my car away. I burned my ID, social security card, and last few dollars. And I hit the street. I learned how to panhandle, where to sleep and where not to, and how to hitchhike from town to town. I camped and hung around with other like-minded people, hippies, punks, and other dissatisfied customers. And I learned the language. I learned that people that weren't like us, that weren't trying to start a revolution, were called normies, housies, and they were domesticated. Since they were just cogs in the big evil machine, and they had way more than they needed, it was no problem for us to expect to be able to withdraw money from them for our needs and wants to be met. I literally called a Sharpie marker for writing on cardboard signs my debit card, and the public was my ATM. I found out that as a single homeless man without any money, I was eligible for the maximum food stamp benefits, and it was easy to sign up for in most states. I said I was retired when I was 20 years old. I started drinking in the morning. The saying was, "Wake up and rage." What else was there to do when my whole existence revolved around myself? But it wasn't all beaches and lush redwood forests. I ended up in San Francisco, Portland, Eugene, and Los Angeles, sleeping on sidewalks, behind dumpsters, and in empty carports. I was digging in garbage cans for food and either spending what money I could on alcohol or stealing it. I started to notice that the people around me were pretty hypocritical. They would talk about peace and love and unity, while at the same time saying nothing but hateful things about everyone else that's not like them. They complained about not having homes, not having proper medical care or proper meals, and so on. Yet they weren't doing anything to improve their situation and were even turning down help from people that were trying to give them a hand up. I'll never forget this one time I was holding a sign. This was in Arizona. A guy asked me if I wanted to work, and I said yes, of course. I helped him do drywall cleanup for 3 hours, and he gave me $30 for my work, $10 an hour. But I was mocked by the people I was camping with because they made way more than me by continuing to hold signs instead of working. I realized that I was a hypocrite too. It was the fact that I didn't want to hold down a job or start something of my own, but I did want to accept other people's hard-earned money. It became apparent that it was more than that, though. I wanted food stamps, but I didn't want to pay taxes. I wanted to hitchhike down roads, to use healthcare systems when I needed it. I wanted to have access to all the social safety structure without supporting it myself. I became so depressed and anxious, the weight of my own cognitive dissonance ever and always present, and my drug and alcohol use spiraled out of control. I tried over and over again to get off the streets. I'd get a job and I'd clean up in public restrooms, and I'd save money until I could afford a place to live, and then eventually I would self-sabotage. Looking back, part of it was survivor's guilt. I didn't feel like I deserved a home and a bed. It was also that I had gotten so used to having to figure out every single day that when my days became more or less routine, I would romanticize the old times. I'd relapse, lose my job, stop paying rent, and get evicted. I'm not actually sure how many times that happened. Too many. One morning, I woke up on the couch of a friend who was letting me stay at his home. I'd been drinking myself to sleep and waking up sick. However, this day was different. I didn't feel sick. I felt very lucid, and there was a golden hue all around me. This was my coming to Jesus moment, and I will be very glad to share that story in greater detail another time. That morning, I knew that it was my time to stop, time to get help. The person I was staying with laughed when I said I was going to church, but I went anyway. And I went the next week, and the week after that, and eventually I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Things really started to change. I joined the worship team. I was starting to go to weekly Bible studies, and I made a ton of new friends and was even invited to go on a mission trip to Argentina. It was there in Argentina that I saw complete and abject poverty for the first time. I saw people out in the desert who were living in such degraded circumstances, who really didn't have much of a choice in the matter. The pastor asked me to share my testimony, and as I did, I saw what an entitled, ungrateful, self-centered young man that I'd been. I walked away from opportunities that they would dream of having so that I could run around on the street and drink whiskey in the gutter. I cried and cried and cried, and I knew that America wasn't my problem. Rich people weren't my problem. My parents weren't my problem. My problem was me, or more specifically, my perspective. I came back to the United States and agreed to allow my church and my family to support me in enrolling in a teen challenge program in Denver, Colorado. I wanted to gain the tools that I'd need for lasting recovery. And when my pastor told me that it was also a Christian discipleship program, I made my decision. I completed the 12-month program and felt like I graduated into a new person with a new mission in life. A few years later, I moved back to Minnesota to help my dad after he'd had some health setbacks, and I ended up in Duluth. I'd heard about the Superior hiking trail, and I wanted to give it a try. In 2022, I hiked 200 miles of the Superior hiking trail all by myself and proved to myself again that I'm capable of accomplishing and overcoming challenges that are greater than I could have ever imagined. Having fell in love with the area, I found an apartment in Duluth, and in 2023, I met my future wife, Miss Randa Lee. We were married later the same year. In 2024, we had our first daughter, Marilee. And in 2025, we had our second daughter, Jubilee Agnes. Now I'm a full-time house supervisor at an adult foster care home. It affords our bills so that my wife can stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom with our daughters. And I think, wow, it's totally possible. It's possible to go from being homeless, addicted, sleeping next to dumpsters, to having a home with a beautiful family in a beautiful city, and to find work doing something I enjoy. My wife and I are taking what money we can after paying our bills and putting away into investments for our future and into investments for our daughters so that they can have a head start when they're ready. And I think, wow, it's possible. And I know that this simply and unfortunately is not the case everywhere in the world for everybody. There are plenty of places where you can't just go from the bottom of the lowest class and in a handful of years, with hard work and dedication, make a completely new and comfortable life for yourself and your family. But you can here in the United States of America. And finally, again, I think, wow, I am so grateful for this country. This country that took care of me when I didn't even want to take care of myself. This country has provided me the opportunity to take care of myself, to grow and improve myself, and to work hard to achieve a standard of living for myself and my family. Now that I'm a dad and I'm watching my beautiful girls growing up, I see this opportunity filled country being hijacked, being held hostage, being gaslighted, coerced, bullied, and censored into thinking that socialism might be a good idea. I see people on the streets with signs, protesting, asking the government for free health care for illegal immigrants, and sounding a lot like I did when I was young, rebellious, entitled, and confused. I want to tell my story because it took a lot. It took a lot of years. It took weird experience. It took jail time, detoxes, so many cold and wet nights. But that's what it took for me to open my eyes and become grateful for what I have in the United States of America. If my story can help someone gain a broader perspective without having to go through a fraction of what I have, it will all be worth it. America isn't the problem. Rich people aren't the problem. The problem is our perspective.